Recently, English has been known for having a lot of weird words. That is the auxiliary verb do. Now, guys may be wondering why this word is so weird. I mean, the sentence I do my homework can be translated into basically any language in the world. However, we're not looking at the normal verb to do, but rather we'll be focusing on do support, a mandatory part of English grammar that basically supports a sentence and is used in all types of simple and complex statements and questions. There are many ways that the auxiliary verb to do can be used, so let's go through them one by one. But before that, let's take a look at some history of do support in English. The exact date of do support isn't truly clear. However, there are some estimations. The true reason for why English grammar is simplified in this case isn't completely known either. However, grammar simplification is a natural process of all known languages. But it is interesting how the sentence, I am not, is correct, and while I know not is definitely grammatically correct as well, it isn't used often. It is mainly considered archaic. Old English had many verb inflections to convey tense, mood, and aspect, but over time they are lost. Do support may have arisen to compensate for these lost inflections in order to indicate tense and mood. Furthermore, the grammar of English changed a lot due to contact with Norse and French, which could have helped contribute to do support. But most importantly, other known groups of languages that uses do support, the Celtic languages, also affected English drastically, and is thought to be responsible for do support in modern English. However, there are some things that do support is used for in modern English that isn't used for in Celtic languages, which we will discuss later. Those are some reasons for why do support has evolved into widespread use, so now let's talk about the history of where this comes from. Traveling all the way back to the 5th and 12th century, we can see Old English, or the pre-do support period. If you've ever studied Dutch, German, or North Germanic languages such as Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish, you may realize that questions are formed through changing word order. In order to say, when do you come home in Old English, you'd say, Juana kims thu ham. Translating word for word, this is, when come you home, where the subject and verb are switched. Now we're past the 12th century, but also before the 15th century to look at Middle English, where it had heavy influence from Norman French and other languages. Do support wasn't completely in widespread use, but it started emerging, specifically for emphasis, to indicate tense and negation. An example of a sentence without do support in Middle English would be Spreekest thu English, or do you speak English? I'm sure you could, for the most part, understand what that sentence meant. However, somewhere in the middle there, the grammar completely shifted. Here is the same sentence with do support that arose somewhere around that period. Dost thou speak in English? Do you speak English? As you can see, this was a major period for grammatical change in the English language, but the evolution of do support didn't stop there. Let's now look at early modern English, or more commonly known as Shakespearean English. Here we have archaic sentences that people know and love. Some common examples are, dost thou love me? Thou does not love me, and verily he doth speak the truth. These examples illustrate how do support evolved from early Middle English to early modern English. After this period was modern English, which is the version of English we speak now, so it isn't all that important to look at. Now I think we should look at the different uses of do support and compare them with other languages. Probably the most common way do support is used in modern English is with questions. For yes and no questions, an example would be something like, do you like ice cream? While for more open-ended questions, we can say something like, where do you live? As far as I know, there aren't any other major languages that have a system like this. Every language has their own way to form question statements, whether it is with a participle, changing word order, or using an auxiliary verb like English. The closest language I found is Lingala, a language spoken in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they have an auxiliary verb azalaki, which translates more to as was. So far, English is looking pretty unique in this category. Now we have negations. A simple one would be I do not like broccoli, where the auxiliary verb is paired with not in order to negate the sentence. Subjects in the verb can also switch. For example, never did he run that fast again, where did and ran switch places. We can also form these sentences with adverbs. She rarely does her homework. Again, the only languages I found were some that are closely related to English, such as Scots and Neola, an extinct language spoken in Ireland. Besides that, almost all languages have their own system for negating verbs. Next, we have emphatic statements and verb intensification. For example, I do love chocolate and she does enjoy reading books. I personally don't hear this too often, so this one might be more prevalent in other varieties of English. Once again, no other languages feature this aspect of grammar. Next, we have elliptical sentences, where a certain aspect of the sentence is omitted, but the context is still clear. In this list, we have tag questions. He plays well, doesn't he? Elliptical questions, I like video games, do you? And elliptical statements, they swam, but I didn't. Once again, I came up empty-handed when looking for other examples of this in other languages, so let's move on. Now going back to questions, but in the past tense, we can see that the Celtic languages use a similar structure. In Welsh, Wnes ti fwyta super translates to did you eat supper, where the past tense form of the verb gneud, conjugated to wnest, is used as an auxiliary verb for forming questions. However, gneud has many other uses besides this, so it's hard to compare to do support in English, but it's similar and many Celtic languages have a form of this. Furthermore, languages like Turkish and Persian have their own auxiliary verbs very similar to do support. In Turkish, we can say ben Türkçe konuşuyorum, I speak Turkish, and then ben Türkçe konuşmayı seviyorum, I like to speak Turkish. In this case, seviyorum, like, is the main verb, and konuşmayı, to speak, is the compound verb formed with the auxiliary verb do, yapmak, to create something similar to English's do like. Some other small examples are German's tun, to do, and some dialects and sentences that are considered grammatically incorrect. For example, ich tu das nicht kaufen, I don't buy that. Also in Dutch, sentences like do jij dat opruimen is used ironically by younger people. This translates roughly to did you tidy that? As you can see, English is almost alone in this aspect of grammar, and even though Celtic languages have a form similar to this, it isn't 100% identical. Although it is widely accepted as a theory that they introduced it into English, some people believe it is because of Norse, Norman French, and Celtic all influencing Middle English, and this resulted as a byproduct. One last thing I'd like to talk about is a do support role in the development of the modern past tense. As mentioned before, all languages are simplified, and in Old English, there were a lot of irregular verbs. For example, would you believe me if I told you that the past tense of I help used to be ik hope? In Middle English, this changed to I hope or I hope it, which in early modern English became I did help. Finally, later on during that same period, I helped was the final product. We can see here it kind of looks like the did merged to the end of help to create something like I helped. And this happened with a lot of verbs back then because historians believed that there were so many irregular verbs that non-native speakers of the language and just speakers in general didn't want to remember all the irregular verbs. So subconsciously, most of them disappeared. If you look at the pattern of irregular verbs nowadays, we can see that most irregular verbs are verbs that are commonly used, such as to be, to go, verbs like that, that are used like almost all the time. So those types of verbs are the ones that stuck because those are used very often. Anyways, that's going to be the end of the video. It was fun going through the history of this crazy aspect of grammar with you guys, and I'd love to look more into English's history and different aspects of grammar as well. There's a video on the screen that YouTube themselves thinks that you'll be interested in, so you should probably click that one. Also, it has been a long time since I've made another video, and I know the finished video has been doing really, really well, so I thank you guys for that. And I do apologize for leaving you guys with a 8-ish minute long video, but I promise that I have been working on new videos. Hopefully, I can get to a new consistent schedule, and I have really good things planned for this channel in the future. So I think that's going to be it for me, and I'll see you guys in the next video.